Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Spartan Tailgate podcast. I'm Chris Ranini, joined as always by Dan Kilbridge. We're here to reflect on MSU's opening win and look ahead to the big matchup with Oregon. But first, we'll bring Dan in. Dan, how you doing, man?
Doing well. I'm excited that we finally have some actual games and things to break down as opposed to 15 minutes of practices and press releases for scrimmages. This is something different and new and exciting.
Yeah. Now you're actually not going to be able to watch. You're not going to be able to see much of the Oregon game, are you?
I will be able to watch the game. I would be there, but my cousin, who is a Michigan State grad, scheduled his wedding during the Michigan State bye week, and then Mark Hollis and company rained on our parade and moved the Oregon game to this week. So the wedding is actually Friday, which is nice, but we've got stuff going all night Saturday, and I'll be able to kick back and watch the game, hopefully see some things and remember a couple of plays to dissect on the podcast next week.
It's always a risk when you schedule an in-season wedding. I read some Ohio State fans had a similar deal because their Virginia Tech game this week was also originally a bye week. That's always a risk you take. That's part of the reason I got married in the summer was because we knew it would be absent of all any sports-related or work-related issues. So,
Yeah.
but
That's good thinking, Chris.
yeah, it should be a good one, though. But first, we look back at Jacksonville State. The Spartans easily dispatched the Gamecocks 45-7 in a game that was never close. Spartans took their first offensive series into the end zone, never looked back. I believe it was 38-0 at halftime, 35-0. Obviously, the biggest story was probably Connor Cook, both how he looked and the hit he took on that first drive.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was with you in the press box, and I didn't even see Tony Lippett cross the goal line. I had my attention on Cook because that was obviously a big thing, and I didn't even watch the next few plays. You had your binoculars up there, and I just kept seeing what they were doing with Cook on the sideline, and MSU probably had to breathe a sigh of relief when he was healthy because he was absolute money, going 12 for 13, and never really struggling all that much. What did you think of his performance and maybe the game as a whole?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just felt really stupid. Like, I think I picked 38-20 on this podcast last week, and then it's like you get to the first quarter and you're like, oh yeah, this is a team that won the Rose Bowl last year and they're playing an FCS opponent, and I'm really dumb. I don't know how I thought they would score 20 points. So definitely impressive, all things considered. And yeah, that Cook hit was really bad, and he was still upset about it at practice on Tuesday, rightfully so. But it's a little different to hear a Michigan State quarterback give his opinion in such a strong way. He said he was pissed off about it. He was disgusted watching it again on the replay, called the cheap shot. But luckily for State fans, he seemed to be moving fine at practice from what everyone said. He was cutting and planting, doing all those things. I think that brace he wears on his left knee, I guess MSU has all their quarterbacks wear it, I think is what Lisa Byington said when I was rewatching the game, but it's just sort of a precautionary measure. And he said he really thought that brace prevented serious damage, and he was very fortunate that that didn't happen. So, again, that was huge that he's moving like he is, and also I thought even more so because of how he played after that. The one thing that stood out to me later was his footwork. I know you and I talked a lot about that throw he had running to his left where he found Mumphrey downfield. An incredibly impressive play, and one where he was able to actually, rolling around, got his feet set, and it looked like just perfect technique, where I don't know if he has that last year. So I think all the off-season work really helped in terms of his technique and footwork and the little things. Those are things we all talked about being big keys going into this season. And, yeah, that guy looked really, really good. I mean, a few of those throws would have been impressive in off-season workouts with no defenders. I mean, he just had one hell of a night.
Elsewhere, offensively, Jeremy Langford only averaged 4.4 yards a carry. Nick Hill was at 4.7. Not a whole lot between the tackles. I know they got Shelton and Burbridge out wide with some sweeps. Is that a point of concern? Because I know last year, especially Langford, he'd get better as the game went on, and obviously he only played a half, so who knows how it would have translated with another half of play. But I think it's more about the offensive line, which was already thin and lost Travis Jackson for much of that game. Brian Allen, the true freshman, appears to be the first lineman off the bench, and he had good and bad moments. I think he had both of MSU's penalties.
Yep.
And
he's excited. Those true freshmen, they get pretty excited out there.
It appears Jackson is good to go, or at least very close to that. How do you assess the injuries and the offensive line and the running game as a whole?
Well, I mean, according to D'Antonio, everyone's fine, and Dave Warner kind of said the same thing. Although these are the weeks we really miss Dan Roshar on the staff, because he would I swear he'd take take out the X-ray charts, be like, well, as you can see, as the left knee goes this way. I mean, he was incredible. He just gave specific injury reports every week, and we were trying to get Dave Warner to follow in his footsteps, and he wouldn't do it. So no more Dr. Roshar on the staff, but I think that Langford is probably the biggest question mark, and Kings too, with those lower leg injuries. You don't know just how explosive they'll be. Warner said that Langford seemed fine in practice, and I guess we'll kind of find out on Saturday what sort of shape that they're in. Travis Jackson also looked very serious the other night, but it sounds like he'll be fine, and I think that's the best news of all for State fans because, like you said, Brian Allen's probably the starter there, and that's obviously not an ideal situation to have a true freshman starting in your first non-conference road game. That would have been a tough assignment for him. Not that he couldn't handle it, but I do believe Jackson will start, and I think he and Cook are probably good to go 100%, which is huge. And then Kings and Langford, I don't know for sure, but we have no reason to believe that they won't be playing.
Kings is the one that surprises me because looking at what happened during the game and then seeing him go off on crutches, I thought it might have been an Achilles injury. The way he seemed to land, it didn't seem like he twisted it. Maybe it was a foot issue. Yet Mark D'Antonio hasn't disclosed that information. But if he's available after walking off on crutches last week, is pretty surprising.
Yeah, I mean I thought season ending, just the way he was in pain and leaving the field on crutches. Yeah. And same thing with Connor Cook too. That hit just looked grotesque. It was sort of almost, not quite as bad, but the Willis McGahee where the knee just totally bends the wrong way, and it's really tough to see. But yeah, apparently both guys got lucky, and they looked worse than they actually were.
With Langford, I think it was both. I think both times he came out, he was pounding on the ground afterward. Yeah. And I thought it was at the time. I thought it was out of frustration for missing a hole, missing a block, not breaking a tackle or something like that. But then it looked like it was because of that. And I saw reports that Langford thought that Jacksonville State was being a little dirty with things. I wasn't sure about that, but at this point it's kind of moot. I would imagine he's good to go and pretty good. On the other side of the ball, the defense was as good as advertised. Questions at linebacker I think were answered. Tawan Jones seemed to play pretty well. Narduzzi thought he played well enough, but we know Oregon's going to be a whole nother challenge. I thought the biggest, not surprise, but thing that stuck out to me about the defense was that Trey Waynes did not record a single stat in the whole box score. I don't believe he was even thrown at once, which is just an incredible thing. I know he only played a half, and I know it was an FCS opponent, But that's the absolute definition of locking down your guy. And Pat Narduzzi said after the game that they had some pretty good receivers. So for Trey Waynes to do that, he appears to, at least one game into the season, be filling that role of Darqueze Dennard quite well. What did you take away from the defense, and specifically maybe how the linebackers played?
Yeah, I thought, to your point on Waynes, he was awesome, and getting a lot of momentum now as a very, very talented cornerback, and also looking at a potential big pick in next year's draft. I think the last mock draft I read had him going at like 13 to Kansas City in the first round. So maybe he has the opportunity to do that. But yeah, I thought he was really good. Linebackers, very impressive against the run, especially Ed Davis. Holy shit, he made some plays that I didn't see the first time, and then watching the replay really stood out where he leapt over that defender, and he made some huge plays, as did Darian Harris. Now, Harris had a few errors in coverage, but really made some nice tackles, and I thought Twan Jones did as well. The one thing I looked at kind of in this game, what I wanted to see is the busted coverages and things like that you don't get away with at Oregon. And there were 3 plays to me that would have been touchdowns against Oregon. There was the very first play of the game, which from our vantage point looked to be a mistake by Darian Hicks at corner, and Narduzzi said today that it was actually Drummond who was responsible for that mix-up. So that was surprising, and makes Darian Hicks's night even more impressive, knowing that he didn't even have that initial first error that we thought he did. So he could be a really good one, too. So there's that play. DeMarcus James, the tailback, got loose up the middle on Twan Jones. I think he was a step late reading it, and James dropped the ball literally and figuratively. But Jones, he had some great closing speed to get there, but again, I think that's caught and a touchdown against Oregon. And then lastly, can't remember the exact play, but Darian Harris was out of position, and Curtis Drummond kind of had to make like a shoestring tackle, and I think it was only about a 25 or a 30-yard gain. But again, when you get those athletes that Oregon has, all 3 of those are touchdowns. So yeah, very impressive night by the defense, but not perfect, and definitely some work to be done this week as they get ready for an offense that's going to be slightly more talented than the one they saw on Friday.
Yeah, and we'll transition into Oregon there. Like you said, the big plays are, to me, the number one key. D'Antonio mentioned about defense being an accountability game. You have to do the phrase "do your job" doesn't mean any more than it does in this game, because you gave those examples right there. If you one broken coverage, and they're going to hit it, and that's exactly what they're designed to do. To get a little bit more specific into things, when you look at MSU's, I guess we'll start with MSU's offense against Oregon's defense. What do you think is MSU's game plan and focus, and what needs to be done?
I think you've got to establish the running game. Not so much to obviously you want to control the clock, but I think you've talked about this too. It's with Oregon's ability to go so fast on offense. That's not always something you can do in a game like this, and it doesn't always make as big of a difference if the other team can score in 45 seconds or whatever it is. But I do think establishing the run against Oregon's 3-4 defense is going to be a big key in this one. And it's interesting that they go against this 3-4 that maybe they haven't seen a ton of, but saw it recently with Stanford, and then also every year with Notre Dame. And that's a game, the Notre Dame game
in Jacksonville State too.
Yeah, yep. And that's a game, Notre Dame, where Michigan has struggled to run the ball in the past. So they've got to establish that, maybe some weak side stuff and some counters to go off that 3-4. But what I think really plays to their advantage here is their tight end group. We saw Josiah Price with some second half receptions. He was really good. Jamal Lyles got in there. And then Andrew Gleichert blocked great in that first game. He's kind of that H-back guy, and he looked really, really good to me, creating an edge and getting blocks. So against a 3-4, having a too-tight set, if those guys can get to the linebackers and take out two of them, that's really big. And then passing-wise, you might be able to get a mismatch there with either Lyles or Price. So I do think they want to use a lot of double-tight stuff in this one, and that could play to their advantage. So I think that you got to do those things, and then Connor Cook's talked about this a lot, but you've got to take advantage of those big plays when they're presented, and Michigan State really hit on a lot of those opportunities on Friday and in the last two games of last year against Ohio State and Stanford. They took advantage of what the defense gave them, and I think that's, again, huge here.
Yeah, and you look at the box score from Oregon's first game against South Dakota. Now, I know a lot of this might have been against backups and whatnot, but South Dakota averaged 4.4 yards per carry. That's with sacks. And if, for an FCS opponent, that's not bad. They broke off a 45-yard run, a 12-yard run, a couple 12-yard runs, and 13-yard runs. So they did allow some holes there. Now, maybe they were extra vanilla on defense. It's also a possibility. But they have a new defensive coordinator in Don Pelham. New in the sense that it's the first time he's a coordinator. He's been there. He's been at Oregon forever, and he replaces Nick Aliotti, who had been at Oregon forever. So it's a system that they've run for a long time. But they do have a new guy calling the shots on that side of the ball. And when it comes to that running the ball, I think the pace comes down to whatever MSU's comfortable with, because in this game, South Dakota doubled up Oregon in time of possession, 39 minutes to 20 minutes, and Oregon scored like 44 points, or 62 points, I'm sorry. So they'll strike you quick. So eating the clock on offense, I don't think is that important. I think it's more important defensively, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah. I do think those big plays, it'll be interesting to see what sort of blitzes Oregon has, because they didn't do much of anything against South Dakota.
I think you're right about that. I talked to Will Rubin from our Oregon site, and I'm going to post a Q&A with him. What day is it today? When are we going to run this, Thursday or Friday?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So it may be already up by the time you listen to this.
All right. Well, happy Thursday or Friday, everybody. And, I think they were – so I'm going to post that Q&A on Thursday morning with him at Spartan Tailgate. But
yeah, we're recording this on Wednesday because of the aforementioned wedding that Dan has to get to.
Yeah, the wedding's really screwing everything up this week, but should be fun. However, getting back to the point here, I think Will said that they were very vanilla on defense and ran a lot of like base cover 3 stuff on third down and short and stuff that they don't normally do. So he thought that they're going to have a lot more in that regard, and I think they will too. But we've seen Stanford run the ball at them with success in recent years, so I don't think it's a given that Michigan State is going to have a lot of trouble with that. I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest key matchups in this game.
Yeah, Oregon's defense it's always, in the past, I believe they've been very good at recording tackles for losses and sacks and stuff like that, but they give up a lot of yards, and part of that is because of their defense is on the field for 35, 40 minutes a game. So those numbers aren't always, fair. So,
but that's what you get for running that up.
I'm just talking about from a pure statistical standpoint that maybe they're not good. But that's where the efficiency stats come into play. Let me see what Oregon's running.
And that's where I think we'll get into this too, but I think maybe that's where the weather comes into play as well on Saturday. It's supposed to be really, really hot. I think I saw a high of 98, and we can talk about this a little later too. But you wonder, with their defense figuring to be out there a lot, if they don't wear down toward the end of the game, and we see Langford and that offensive line kind of do what they did consistently last year late in games.
Yeah, I think MSU's offensive line is the biggest question mark in this because of the injuries, because of the depth. They like to roll guys in and out, and they didn't do that against Jacksonville State. They had the same 5 guys into the third quarter there. So, and with this heat, they're probably going to want to rotate guys. So whether that's Brandon Clemens, whether that's, I guess they're still deciding about Miguel Machado, I think is how you pronounce it, Machado, whatever.
Yeah, Machado. He'll be on the plane. They're going to travel him, but yeah, they're not sure yet.
So he's a possibility. So you've got options there, and they're probably going to have to exhaust them on the offensive side of the ball. Looking at the other side, I'll let you go first. This is obviously the matchup that everybody's excited to see. What are your just kind of initial thoughts on the styles and how they match up?
Yeah, I'm just so excited because they are such different philosophies. I mean, Oregon's style is obviously you put the athletes wherever you can and find a mismatch. I mean, they've got Marcus Mariota was not a quarterback in high school when Oregon recruited him, and they're just all about, it's a lot of read stuff. They sort of trust these players to recognize coverages and sort of read things on the fly and then try to find the potential mismatch, and they do it so explosively with those athletes. They have a ton of fun to watch. I mean, you watch them against average defenses every year, and they make them look like a joke. They score at will, seemingly, because of those athletes and because they are very comfortable with that system. So they do that very well. But on the flip side, I think Michigan State does what it does just as well. Obviously, games like the 10-7 win at Ohio State in 2000. Was it 2010 or 11? 11. Yeah, I mean, probably the best defensive performance I've ever seen. But that is not as it's not as exciting, I guess, to the average fan as Oregon putting up 65 or 70 points or whatever it may be. But Michigan State, defensively, they're kind of set in what they do, and it's a lot of reacting on their part too. So both of these units sort of have their base. They're both actually simpler than you would think. I mean, you would think Oregon's offense looks complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. Same thing with Michigan State's defense. So they both sort of react to each other. I think they're going to feel each other out for a little bit, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see how MSU handles those athletes. And I think they match up certainly better than just about any team in the country because of their speed at linebacker and because those cornerbacks and safeties are so good.
It is really simple, and Chip Kelly, the former head coach, that was something that, since he's gotten to the NFL, a lot of NFL folks have been kind of confused by maybe how simple it is, in the sense that it's a few plays with a bunch of different options, and it all depends on if you're reading a lineman, if you're reading a linebacker, and it's just everybody doing their job, and that's what MSU's defense has been built on. And it's a strength on strength, but one weakness this MSU defense has, when they give up a touchdown, at least last year, it often was due to a big play, and especially in 2012, they gave up big plays would cost them the games, and that's exactly what Oregon's offense is designed to do, to make you make a mistake. And if this was MSU's defense last year, I think it'd be an even more compelling matchup with, Max Bulla calling everything on the inside. I think there still are questions on this side of the ball, and because it's early in the season, so it'll be really interesting to see how some of those new guys like Tawan Jones and Darian Harris and Darian Hicks react to this situation, because this is as difficult as it's ever going to be in their collegiate careers right here this weekend, going up against this offense. And you mentioned them destroying average offenses. I read a stat thing from ESPN. Since 2010, Oregon is 2-3 against, I think 2-3 against top 20 defenses,
Uh-huh.
and 46-3 against everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's damn impressive, the 46-3, because they're not all 100th ranked defenses. There's some good average to good defenses in there that I'm sure were a part of that. And I know everybody compares this to Stanford because of the similar philosophies in that they're a power team built on running the ball and built on defense, but it's really not the case because Stanford runs that 3-4 defense. MSU runs a very different defense than Stanford runs, and everybody points to Stanford's last 2 wins against Oregon, which were very impressive. Certainly, Stanford's last 2 wins against Oregon. But the 2 years prior to that, Oregon put up 50 points in each game. So it's not something that Stanford simply wins because they're a power team or because they have a good defense. It's because after years of getting their brains beat in, they have figured out how to attack that defense. And I'm curious what Narduzzi has gathered from. I'm sure he studied that, and I'm very interested to see what he gathered from that in terms of defensive philosophies, because I'm not sure how much MSU will blitz in this, in the sense that it opens you up for a big play when you do that. And the defensive ends are going to have to, we talked about this last week, they're going to have to rush, but they're going to have to contain. And I know there was one play last week, Marcus Rush played one of those absolutely beautifully. I made a comment to you actually in the press box. He played the pitch absolutely perfectly, and that's what MSU is going to need out of that. And it'll be interesting to see if they try to use Shalik Calhoun's aggressiveness against him, because that's something the MSU defense has been prone to do. They get aggressive, and then teams will hit them with a counter or a reverse or something that, attacks the aggressiveness and opens it up for a big play. So it's a really interesting clash of styles, and I don't think one game determines what style is better. Mark Helfrich made a good comment the other day. We lose to Stanford, and all of a sudden our style of play is a gimmick, and we have to blow it up. Meanwhile, Stanford last year goes and loses to Utah, and that's just it's an aberration. And he made a fair point on that. Before last year, Oregon had made, I think, 4 straight BCS bowls, which no one else had done.
I think it's way beyond a gimmick at this point. At first it was kind of looked at it like that, but now this is an established offense. It's not like they're cheating. They've got a system that works for them, and it's a ton of fun to watch. Especially one of those West Coast games. It's always fun to, once you get the whole college football slate out of the way, you can always count on Oregon coming on at 10 o'clock or something. Although I guess now their conference network is sort of difficult to find.
Yeah, I have it. Last year I had it, but this year I didn't for some reason, so I had to watch. I watched some of the Oregon game online.
We got it, but not in HD. We actually called around, and Buffalo Wild Wings said they had it, Buffalo Wild Wings said they didn't have it, but Reno's said they did have it, so we went there, and it turns out they did not have it. So that was nice. And then
that might be it. I should check my TV after this podcast. Maybe I did have it only in SD.
Yeah, it was up in like the 900s somewhere. I got kind of lost among like the Latin music channel and some other weird things, and finally found it.
Yeah, that's a network that I think is directly owned by the Pac-12. Like, it's not in conjunction with Fox or ESPN like BTN and SEC Network. So they haven't done a very good job of selling that, because for one, this isn't like a diss or anything, but the fan enthusiasm in the West, on the West Coast, just isn't the same as it is, in the SEC. You saw the SEC.
It's nice out there.
Exactly. You got stuff to do.
You can go surfing. You go. There's beautiful women walking around everywhere you look. I get that. There are things that they probably have a better perspective than us here in the Midwest. College football is sort of, oh yeah, it's fun on Saturdays, but they've got other things to do as well. So I get it.
And but that's nothing a statement of those fans that do enjoy it, because Autzen Stadium is one of the loudest stadiums in the country for being, I think, about 50, 60,000 seats, and that actually will transition to kind of outside factors. The Big Ten, when it travels to a Pac-12 team, is usually atrocious, whether it's Michigan at Oregon back in the early 2000s, Nebraska went to UCLA. I remember Northwestern went to Cal and won last year, and it was like a huge thing because the Big Ten never wins that, and it turns out Cal went 1-11. But Ohio State went out to USC. Wisconsin went out to Arizona State, although maybe they probably could have won that one. It's always a difficult thing, and you've got the time change. MSU's leaving on Thursday, earlier than most teams would, but it's also a night game. It's 3:30 local time, so it's not. They're not going to have to wake up at a time that's absurdly early.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think of that time change?
Well, first of all, you failed to mention our Rutgers Scarlet Knights.
Oh, yeah.
Who went out to Washington State University over the weekend and got a big 41-38 win there. So congratulations to Kyle Flood and the Rutgers squad. Good for them.
I thought you were just calling them the Rutgers.
The Rutgers University. It can be done, and Washington State maybe not up to par with Oregon, but yeah, I mean, you always want to consider things like that, I guess, when you're looking for keys to a matchup, be it weather. I know that's a big thing a lot of the times when you look at teams traveling to different coasts, but Pat Narduzzi actually had a really funny, kind of interesting quote about that today. I'm going to see if I can find it because, we're sort of – there's actually – how it works on Wednesdays is we get two MSU assistant coaches for interviews, like 10 minutes apiece, and it's really informal. We just kind of stand around in the Scandalaire Center lobby, and usually there's like, 8 or 9, maybe 10 media people, and today there were at least 20 or 25, and we're all just peppering Narduzzi with questions. We actually asked if we could maybe just do 20 minutes with Narduzzi instead of 10 with him and 10 with Bowman, but they didn't go for it. But yeah, he was just being asked over and over about all these different things about what's gonna change these factors, and he said here's what he said about factors when he was asked about a time change. He said, you can make everything a factor. You can say the food's a factor, the airplane's a factor. We can name all kinds of factors if you let it be a factor. We can go in the meeting room today and say, okay, here's a factor, guys. If we eat too much, if we drink too much. I mean, we can make everything a factor if we look into it. The factor is that offense, okay? That's what we're looking at. That's the only factor we care about. So I think that, I don't think it's...
Clearly, fear is not a factor.
No. Good shout out for that outstanding Joe Rogan reality show. But, I mean, I think that the time change, they're going out there on Thursday. They'll get adjusted. And I think I'm not saying that weather and time changes like that don't play a factor in games, but I do agree with Narduzzi that this really just comes down to the matchup. I mean, when you've got two top 10 programs, I think it's about the X's and O's and just who lines up and punches the other one in the mouth.
See, I do think one thing that will be a little bit of a factor is the weather, which we mentioned, which is supposed to be as high as like high 90s, which is pretty ridiculous for this time of year, you would think. And even the people in Oregon, from what I've read, think that's very high. So it'll be interesting because tempo and staying fresh was always going to be a factor.
Yeah, but that's why I don't like that. That's why I don't think it's an advantage to either team. Like if you're going down to I don't know, Dallas or Houston or something, then yeah, that's a factor when you're a visiting team going into Houston and playing in that heat that you're not used to. But this is very unseasonably warm for Oregon this time of year, from what I understand, and I think that for that reason, it's really not an advantage one team or the other.
That's a fair point. Looking at the big picture, what do you think this game means? What could it mean? I know the Big Ten's got 3 marquee games this week after Wisconsin kind of let everybody down a week ago. Is it too hard to say how much this could factor into the playoff if the Big Ten wins? How much does it help the conference's perception? I know MSU did their part winning the Rose Bowl last year, but MSU's kind of carrying the flag here. In terms of conference and team perception, do you think this is as big of an opportunity as all the buildup is giving it?
I guess. I mean, I think that overall, as media, we do tend to place too much emphasis on like conference pride and things like that, and how a conference stacks up. Now, I know that can come into play, for these playoffs and for rankings, but I just think that this is a game. It's a top 10 game, and I think it means more to either of these two teams than it does, for their respective conferences. Now, having said that, I do think. Actually, Oregon has more to lose here. I mean, I think obviously they're at home, and that's understandable. But they've still got some tough games on the schedule. You'll get Stanford and Cal, and just a lot of tough games coming up. And Michigan State does too. But I think that right now Michigan State is just playing more for themselves than the conference. I don't really think they care that much about taking the Big Ten banner and flying it out the window of the plane while they're going there. And at the same time, it does mean a lot for perception because, like I said, I think we do place too much emphasis, but that's the reality of it. And it is big for a Big Ten team to go out there and win this type of matchup. Now, Michigan State wins this game. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden Ohio State or Michigan or Purdue or whoever is any better. It doesn't mean that the conference is stronger. It just means that Michigan State happened to win this particular matchup. So I don't look at it really as carrying the torch for the Big Ten in any way. I think it's more about carrying the torch for Michigan State and proving that, hey, the 2014 team is ready to make a name for themselves in their own right.
And this is kind of something I said after the Braxton Miller injury when people said it hurt MSU, and I said no, because the Big Ten's perception doesn't matter to MSU anymore. When you're the top dog, all that matters is your own perception, and the perception of the MSU program is a very good one right now, and win or lose, it could still be perceived as a very good program coming out of it. So,
yeah, I mean, like Florida State didn't go out there and win the national championship for the ACC. It wasn't like the ACC is suddenly a power conference.
And so if you're the top dog, I don't think the conference perception matters much. It's usually a point to argue for those second tier and middle of the road teams. I do think MSU has more to lose in the sense of what you said was, or like you said, Oregon has probably more high-profile, tougher games coming up, but that's also more opportunity to raise the perception of this year's team if they lose. I think if MSU loses, I don't think they're out of the playoff picture by any means. I just think they'll have to show more than maybe Oregon would. Plus, considering Oregon is starting higher ranked in this game, which preseason ranking shouldn't mean anything, but they do. In no sport does perception matter more than college football because you have people pick who gets to play for a championship. You don't have that in most any other sport. So I think it's a huge opportunity for MSU to change that perception. D'Antoni had a good comment that when he accepted this game, he knew they weren't ready for it at the time, but the hope was that in the years ahead they would build toward having a program that could compete and win that game, and I think they do.
I wonder, yeah, I mean, in his wildest dreams, I wonder if he could have ever thought that they would be here, because that wasn't all that long ago.
It was
that they
announced.
scheduled
It
this
was
game.
announced. I thought it was 2009, but it wasn't. It was announced in March 2012, but it was also, I'm sure, in the works prior to that. So you're thinking at least coming off the Big Ten championship or coming off the Legends championship. But then you saw what that 2010 team did, getting their asses handed them by Alabama,
Whew.
and so, this is an opportunity for I don't think a loss would really derail anything that D'Antonio's built, but I think a win would just push it that much higher. Okay, about to get into predictions here. What do you think are your 3 biggest keys to the game?
3 biggest keys to the game, like for Michigan State or just overall?
Just overall. I'll go first. I think one is big plays on both sides. Oregon's more prone to them, but a couple for MSU, really goes a long way with that offense. I think big plays is one of them. I think third downs is another huge one, because that's how you get Oregon off the field. You can eat the clock all you want, but if they go 3 and out, that's how you get them back on the sideline. And for the final one, I'm going to go with turnovers.
God, I was going to say turnovers.
You can say turnovers. We can do the same ones.
All right.
And turnover in a bad spot could lead to a quick 7 points for either team in a big game like that. So I'll say big plays, third downs, and turnovers. You can keep them specific to teams if you want to. If one team, Oregon has to run the ball or something like that, you can do whatever you want. So those are my 3.
Okay. I'm going to go with special teams as one. I mean, that's always in a game like this. Whether it be, and I don't know necessarily that field position is as big in this game as it is in other ones, just because of Oregon's offense and how quickly they can go from, say, the 5 to the 30 or whatever it is. But I think punters and kickers, especially when you're looking at a game that figures to be pretty close, is going to make a big impact. And Michael Geiger really hooked that first one against Jacksonville State, and it later came back to get another big one. But he's going to have to be on his game in a foreign environment that's very hostile when he's going. So I think that's going to be big. And also Oregon's kicker, I think they've got a pretty inexperienced one from what I understand. I don't know that he's seen a lot of action. So
I think he might be a true freshman. I haven't looked up, but he didn't attempt a field goal in their first game, and he did miss 1 extra point out of 7 attempts.
Yeah, I think they've actually got a sophomore kicker who's hurt, and so they went with a true freshman walk-on.
Okay.
So if he's the guy who's kicking field goals in this one, then that's big. So I'll say special teams number 1. Number 2 for Michigan State. I'm gonna, you said third down. I'm gonna say first down. I think it's really important for them to be able to pick up 4 and 5 yards of carry on first down when they do run it. Give Connor Cook and the offense some good field position to work with and some short yardage situations on second down. That will allow them to take advantage of those double tight end sets that I talked about earlier and really do some things. So I think Michigan State running the ball on first down is going to be huge. Third, it's got to be the uniforms, right? I mean, I think whoever comes out with the better jersey will ultimately win this game. So I will say definitely jerseys, the number 3, these are not in any sort of order. I think the uniforms are probably the most important factor going into this game.
And a hat tip to the Red Cedar message board for once again convincing a national media presence for some fake uniforms. Those white helmet mock-ups did look really good.
Yeah, Matt Hayes, the latest victim. Another one bites the dust.
My guess is they wear that all white uniform that they debuted in the offseason that I thought looked pretty solid.
Yeah.
Probably white pants along with it. I don't know if they'll have a white helmet or not, but they're all white look that they had from 07 to 09. That was probably my favorite.
Yeah, it's sweet. And I do think I don't think Nike is going to miss this opportunity with Michigan State. You know, they're very cozy with Michigan State, and I think that they'll have something certainly in store because Phil Knight's not going to let this opportunity slip through his fingers.
As for Oregon, I hope they wear their green jersey with the yellow numbers, because when they stick to their school colors, I think it looks great. But when they throw in a ton of black and silver and white, it just kind of looks a little bit more generic to me. But when they have their actual yellow and green school colors, it really pops.
Yeah, I like the ones. I really like the throwbacks that they have with like the lime green and the yellow, which is probably, I think that's what they would have been wearing when State was there in '98, right? I mean, I wonder if that was when Amp Campbell got injured.
They had the yellow helmets back then before they switched to the O logo.
Yeah.
Fun fact about the logo, I didn't realize until a few weeks ago. The inner part of that O, it's the shape of a track, like a running track, because Oregon's got a historic track and field program. So that middle is supposed to represent their famous track and field and track. So I thought it was kind of cool part of that logo. I think they have a really, I think you got a cool logo and color scheme going on there.
That reminds me that Graham Couch for the LSJ did a man on the street segment today where he was walking around asking Michigan State students if they've ever heard of Steve Prefontaine. I don't believe many of them had.
I'm not surprised. You know who knows about Steve Prefontaine is Western Michigan head coach PJ Fleck, who always talks about a Prefontaine pace, which is always going all out. And he loves to do that. Now, right before our predictions, is there any chance Lee Corso picks Michigan State in this game?
I don't know. I think Curtis, a lot of guys on Michigan State's team have talked about being disrespected in the past, and I was actually surprised Curtis Drummond kind of brought it up on his own this week that he thinks they've been disrespected this year. And I guess, I don't know.
Well, that brings up, in that mold, the 2-touchdown, about 12-point underdogs, does it surprise you?
No. I like Michigan State, obviously, to cover that. I think they will cover, but I just think that Oregon can score so fast that even if it's a close game all the way through, they can pull away right at the end, and all of a sudden Michigan State's down 14. So I think that's more about that than anything. I mean, I don't think anyone thinks Oregon's going to blow State out by any means. I just think that because of their offense, maybe if they get up late, they can do something, boom, boom, real quick, and all of a sudden they're up, and it's a lot. It's not nearly representative of the game that was just played. So I guess it doesn't surprise me all that much, and I think players, however, do feel that that's kind of weird that they're underdogs, and Curtis Drummond kind of continues to say, I don't know if they actually believe that they're being disrespected by national media or if they just sort of try to say that as like a team mantra, because I don't know about you. It seems to be like Michigan State has received plenty of respect even nationally this year.
Even at Big Ten Media Day, they asked Shirley Calhoun about, do you guys still have the chip on your shoulder? And he goes, yeah, the media picked us second behind Ohio State. So, yeah, so they'll find for anything. I wonder if they'll even cling to that Ohio State pick, even though it was before the Braxton injury. But I don't think there's any way Lee Corso picks MSU. I was surprised he actually picked MSU in the Rose Bowl. But, Lee Corso always does fun stuff with the Oregon Duck.
Yeah.
So I imagine Oregon will be his pick again. So that'll take us into score predictions. What do you think?
All right, I'm going to say Michigan State 5, Oregon 2. All right, no,
Two safeties. That's a bold.
Yeah, on a serious note, I do think that both teams will score a lot because of the quality of their offense, and I think Michigan State is. I think if any team in the country is suited to play Oregon, it's Michigan State, and I've kind of had a feeling about this game all summer that Michigan State would be able to get it done. And I haven't really strayed away from that. I think it's going to be close, and in the end, I am going to say Michigan State 38, Oregon 34.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be. I'll say I wouldn't be surprised if MSU wins this game, but my pick is Oregon. I think the point spread is about where I would have had it. I think I probably would have had them by about 14, but I think seeing what Connor Cook did last week, lowered that a bit for me. I'll say Oregon 38, MSU 28.
Okay.
I certainly wouldn't be surprised by an MSU win, though. That's for sure. But I just think Oregon at home, coupled with MSU's still inexperienced defense, will be a problem. And I know Oregon's a bit inexperienced too on the outside, but I just think it's simpler for them. I think it's easier to be inexperienced in that offense than it is in MSU's defense. So I'll say 38-28 Oregon. I certainly wouldn't bet on the game. I don't bet on sports, but especially with one like this one, I could see Oregon breaking it open a little bit. I could also see MSU winning the game. So should be a fun one. Gus Johnson's got the call, and those are usually pretty exciting. 6:30 Eastern time on Fox. So before we wrap things up here, we did get one question from a reader. I threw a late notice out if anybody had questions, and then we can just give a couple thoughts on the Big Ten. And at Lone Star V asks, which is more important, the defensive ends keeping contained or the defensive tackles demanding double teams in the middle, which I assume means getting penetration through the middle. So what do you think is more important, the ends or the tackles?
I think it's the ends. I always think with a quarterback that can run, I think Michigan State defensive ends have been the key in Pat Narduzzi. Everyone looks at Pat Narduzzi. This is before he had national recognition, when he was able to really shut down those Michigan offenses. And he actually said today that they are pretty similar to what Rich Rod did at Michigan. And that offense, obviously, say what you want about the program at the time, they could certainly score points. They just couldn't tackle anybody. So I think that all starts with the defensive ends, as those bookends on the outside and being able to handle their man and keeping contained. I've always thought that is the number one key to stopping a mobile quarterback, is you've got to have two defensive ends that are up for the challenge, and what better players could you want in that situation than Shalik Calhoun and Marcus Rush?
I agree. I think it's the ends. Now, Oregon does have some pretty in-depth reads where they'll read a tackle, they'll read a linebacker, but it starts with the ends, keeping the running backs or the quarterback from getting the edge, but also staying gap sound. So I also think it's the ends in that sense. Now, quick recap and look ahead at the Big Ten. Looking back first, Wisconsin, they're up 24-7 on LSU, looking pretty good. They blow that game, lose. Melvin Gordon only got about 3 touches in the second half. Coach said he didn't know why, but also that there was an issue. Now it turns out he had a hip flexor, which is understandable. They also say that Joel Stave didn't go in the game because he was injured, but then they kind of changed that and say no, he's got the yips where it's
he's out with a brain injury.
yeah, and some of those throws I think on the sideline of the LSU game were a little kind of wacky. So thoughts on Wisconsin, which probably ended any hopes they have at the playoff.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm watching that first half thinking, my goodness, Wisconsin, who I thought would win. I think I picked them to win last week. I thought that they looked great. They were running the ball well. They were stopping the run. Those new pieces on defense seemed to be getting in there just fine. And then they have the injury at defensive end, which kind of you don't know how that affects a game when
I think those are big.
They stopped it for like 25 minutes, right? At least.
Yeah, they didn't have much depth there when their linemen started going down.
So, and then Gary Anderson makes some questionable decisions, and Lucky Les strikes again. But the Stave thing is really, really weird. Yeah, basically, like you said, they came out with a press release that he was injured, and that's why he didn't play. And then he apparently went to the SID department and said, I would like to tell my side of the story because that's not true. Can I talk to reporters tonight? And then told reporters, like, yeah, basically he has the yips, and he can't, he's not throwing the ball like he wants to. I read a story in the one of the Wisconsin papers that said that even in like pregame warmups, they could tell from the press box that he was throwing the ball short on basic, 10 to 15 yard routes. They were just all over the place. So that's really, really unfortunate. I can certainly, being a golfer who has really, really battled it mentally this summer, I understand what he's going through. And I remember one time, for baseball tryouts, I think it was one of the years in high school, we had this kid who was a pretty good player, and for whatever reason that week in tryouts he forgot how to throw, and so no one wanted to be his partner because the ball was, it was coming out everywhere. You'd have to chase it, and he could not hit the mitt, and he just had a total mental breakdown. Ended up making the team, and then he got over it once tryouts ended. It was just a totally mental thing, and it sounds like that's what Stave's going through right now. But it just seems so weird to me that they would not have him practice. I mean, he's not even with the team. He's sort of he's doing individual drills, but not doing stuff with the team. And I don't know. I think with how bad that kid looked that they were playing the other night, I think you got to just put him in there and say, hey, man, I don't care if you skip balls short. Just go out there and do what you can. You're our guy. Give him that vote of confidence. I mean, that's what I would do in this case.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, you mentioned baseball, of Rick Ankiel.
Yep.
And he kind of just broke down that. Now looking ahead, 2 games, other notable: Ohio State, Virginia Tech, Michigan, Notre Dame. What are your couple thoughts on Ohio State?
I thought Ohio State, obviously an ugly start, but I was impressed with the way they were able to battle back in the second half, and they didn't ever seem to get down. Obviously, they got lucky a couple times with the that Navy turnover on their end when they had the lead in that game, like they had for most of the first half. But yeah, I thought they looked fine and got their feet settled in the second half, and obviously that option that Navy runs has given a lot of teams trouble. So it wasn't that surprising to me, and I think overall to just gut it out and get the win, I was actually more impressed with Ohio State than I'm sure most people were, and I think they're going to absolutely smoke Virginia Tech this weekend.
I was surprised looking at the box score after the game. I think JT Barrett went 12 for 15.
Yeah, he was fine.
The numbers end up looking pretty good, although I do think that was helped out by a fourth quarter where they kind of blew it open.
Yeah.
But I think part of that was him getting his feet under him. I think this is going to be a really low-scoring game because Virginia Tech's got one of the best secondaries in the country still, and with Bud Foster's defense, and still the question, Ohio State wasn't really able to run the ball very well. Although, with an option team like Navy, it's hard to really judge a team. But I think that's going to be a really slow, low-scoring, kind of boring affair. But I do think Ohio State pulls it out. The other game is Michigan at Notre Dame. In the last ever meeting of this historic rivalry dates back to 1887, even though they've only played 41 times. Thoughts on the Wolverines and the Irish in one final clash of the Titans?
I have no clue. Like, this is a game. You talked about not wanting to touch the Michigan State-Oregon game. I would absolutely not touch this game just because there's so many variables. I think, you look at what Brady Hoke has done on the road, not much, but also they've had some success against Notre Dame. And I thought both teams looked pretty good in week one. Notre Dame, took care of business, and Michigan took care of business, and then they just sort of did what they were expected to do. And I don't know. I mean, we don't know how much Notre Dame will be affected by some of those losses, and we don't know how Michigan's offensive line will look against an actual defense. I guess I'll say Notre Dame by a field goal, but I really am not sure how to feel about this one.
Yeah, it's a really weird series too. I mean, 2 years ago at Notre Dame, I think it was when Michigan threw 6 interceptions, I think, and still
almost won
the game. And Notre Dame
Denard, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really high-scoring affair. I was very impressed with Everett Golson. Rice won. I think they won Conference USA last year. They won 10 games, so it was a pretty good team last year. And he was hitting a lot of deep balls, which was something I don't think we really saw him do all that much 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of a short, just don't make mistakes guy. He seems to have really opened his game up. I thought Michigan's offense looked about as expected. I don't think there's very many people outside of Michigan State that can cover Devin Funchess. They ran the ball pretty well. They had a couple big runs, although I know the offensive line is still kind of up in the air, and now Kyle Bosch is out of there. But I think it'll be a high-scoring game. I'll pick Notre Dame just because they're the home team, but I think that game will be in the 30s. So big opportunity for the Big Ten, and it's all headlined by MSU at Oregon, 6:30 Eastern Time on Fox. Once again, my prediction was 38-28 Oregon, and Dan, yours was?
38-34 Michigan State.
All right. We may have a early week podcast next week, depending on how things go and depending on how Dan's cousin's wedding goes. But thanks for sticking through this long. If you did, feel free to send us some questions at any point for next week's podcast. Thanks for listening again, everybody. For Dan, I'm Chris, and we will talk to you guys next week.
See ya.